Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to welcome everyone to the Baltimore City Commission for Historic and Agricultural Preservation. Before I begin, today is 9/10. Tomorrow will be 9/11. I want to take 23 seconds because it's been literally 23 years. Just take a second for us to take 23 seconds for those of you who've lost family members or any loved ones or know of anyone who's lost any. Just take this time to reflect. And I want to thank all those for their sacrifice during the time of 9/11. So let's take 23 seconds. Thank you. I call this meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. on this day, 9/10, 2024. My name is Harry Spikes, and I am the chairman for the commission, and I will allow everyone to introduce themselves from my left, starting from my left.
Eric Holcomb, Executive Director.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Sarah Langmead, Commissioner.
John Bullock, City Council Representative to the Commission.
Gary Rodwell, Commissioner representing Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation and the Preservation Community.
Tamara Woods, representing DHCD.
Ann Powell, representing Greater Baltimore Committee.
Myra Mendeleev, Commissioner.
Catherine Good, Commissioner.
Peter Morrill, Commissioner.
Kyle Lynn, Commissioner.
Garrett Power, representing the Baltimore City Historical Society.
CHAP staff. Thank you. The CHAP mission is to enhance and promote the culture and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and architectural value. The CHAP goals include preserving historic architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past into its future. Before I move forward, I'm going to give a couple of house rules. Outside, we have an agenda. If there is an item on the agenda that you'd like to speak on, please sign in. Let us know. Eddie gives us the sheet to let us know who wants to speak on the topic. If you would like to speak, we usually give our friends that come through 3 minutes. I usually do this at 2:30 when you have 30 seconds left. We have 3 minutes to speak. On top of that, too, if you have a conversation amongst yourselves, please take the conversation outside because, as you can tell, the mics pick up a lot of sound. Number two, if your cell phone is on, you can have it on, but have it on vibrate. If you need to take a call, take the phone call outside. Other than that, thank you for attending. I would like to make a motion to waive the meeting of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I would like to make a motion to adapt the minutes. Do I have a motion to adapt the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
I was ready.
The ayes have it. Due process and review procedures. CHAP reviews applications in conjunction with the building permit process of the permit section of Department of Housing and Community Development. If a building permit application is filed prior to historic design review, the application is placed on hold. Pending completion of the CHAP review process. The review process is also completed by issuing authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations and does not diminish the force or urban renewal plans, building codes, zoning codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applicants must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. The design review considers the proposed work, taking into consideration the historical and architectural character of the structure and of the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain how their project complies with the design guidelines. Minor projects. In order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Minor projects must significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged historic fabric. All minor work must clearly meet the design guidelines. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new construction are considered major projects and are reviewed at a public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning department to begin the review process. An electronic version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project shall be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP presents recommendations to the Commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the applicant may have a presentation to the Commission. Interested parties, including neighborhood associations, have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the Commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the Commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with the Baltimore City Code. After an authorization to proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The Commission's process is impartial, and staff's comments are evidence that assists the Commission in rendering decisions. I would like to ask for a motion to approve the final agenda. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jill. All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Let's begin. First on our regular agenda, we have City Council Bill number 24-0576, Historic Preservation Conservation Districts Establishment Review and Respond. The applicant, administration on behalf of CHAP, and our leader, Eric Holcomb, will be our staff. Thank you, Eric.
It's been a long time coming.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
We will be reviewing a city council ordinance to establish the conservation district program. So the proposal establishes conservation districts, providing a study, proposal, and review process, defining certain terms, and providing for a special effective date. And I'll be able to tell you what all that stuff means. In addition, the bill makes historic properties in conservation districts eligible for the local historic preservation tax credit. So let's talk about what conservation districts are and why are we looking at these things. The conservation districts are a concentration of historically significant structures that together create a unique historic character for neighborhoods that is worthy of preservation for future generations. Conservation districts would protect its historic character through a CHAP-administered design review process for new construction, demolition, and limited types of alterations. But this would be different from the level of review for local historic districts and Baltimore City landmarks, where all exterior changes are reviewed and approved by CHAP. So conservation districts, the design review is less restrictive than the design review for local historic districts. That's the only difference between a conservation district and a local district. So let's look at how the legislation sets up the proposed designation process. So the ordinance to create a conservation district, right? So in order to create a conservation district, we have to have a city council ordinance. And in that ordinance, in the enabling legislation, it sets up that all conservation district ordinances must be supported by quote unquote findings of fact, and here they are. We need evidence that the conservation districts comply with the requirements for certified local government under the National Historic Preservation Act, They comply with the Secretary of Interior standards for identification and registration and CHAP's own historic preservation procedures and guidelines. So in order to meet the above requirements, CHAP must provide what the legislation says is a full and proper study to City Council that includes the following: a description of the historic character of the conservation district, the historic significance statement of a conservation district, why the district is historically important is what it tells us, application of criteria for evaluation. So we got to make sure that the conservation districts meets one of the full four criteria for evaluation. We know these, they're in our procedures and guidelines, and they mirror the National Register with the Secretary of Interior standards for evaluation and designation. So so the quality of significance in Baltimore history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture is present in district sites, public buildings, public interior structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and are associated with events that have made significant contribution to the broad patterns of Baltimore history, or that are associated with the lives of persons significant in Baltimore's past, or that embody distinctive characteristics of type, period, method of construction, or that represent a work of a master or possess high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction, or that may yield or likely to yield information important to Baltimore history or prehistory. So the proposed designation process in the full and proper study, we will need to provide a chronology of the outreach for the designation process. You guys make certain that staff has done when we create historic districts and when we create conservation districts. We have done our due diligence with a comprehensive outreach process and consensus building process. We also provide for a property owner survey asking for support or opposition. We present that to you and analyze that. We have a boundary analysis and justification that meets the Secretary of Interior standards of identification and registration. And this is the only thing different from a local historic district. We will also include in that full and proper study, not in the district or not in the ordinance to create a district, but in the full and proper study, we will create a list of the alterations that CHAP will review and approve through the issuance of an authorization to proceed and sign off in the permit system. So that is the biggest difference right there. And we decided to go with a list of alterations instead of trying to make separate design guidelines for each conservation district. We just have a list of those alterations, which we will review and review according to our current guidelines. And we could talk about that further because that's there's nuance to that. What are the benefits of a conservation district? It preserves and protects the overall character of a district. This is important. It provides for a public forum, this hearing, for community input for new construction, demolition, and significant alterations. A lot of neighborhoods and communities out there are looking for a opportunity to state their wishes when it comes to new construction. Historic properties in the conservation districts will be eligible to apply for the historic preservation tax credits. We're hoping that includes state and federal. We know that through this designation, it will include local, and we'll follow up with the Maryland Historical Trust. It helps create the maintenance and rehabilitation of costs, so will be more affordable, and it preserves and celebrates the history of all Baltimoreans. So I'm going to just sort of summarize what is written up there. But why conservation districts? Well, first of all, in the history of preservation in the United States, conservation districts were first looked at to be districts that would not meet the designation criteria for local historic district designation. But after 62 years of preservation activity under the 1966 Historic Preservation Act. I guess it's only 58 years. What we have done is we have evolved to really expand eligibility in terms of what meets the designation criteria. So that's really important. So what was considered not historic in the 1970s and even through the 2000s, now we would consider historic. And that is really a push, I think, that preservation has done towards equity. Secondly, again, we're looking at capturing and celebrating the histories of marginalized people and or common vernacular architecture. So today, most preservationists see that many structures with incompatible alterations or in states of deterioration still retain their historic character. After doing this for 50-some years, we've discovered that, a deteriorated building still has significance and integrity. So this change in historic preservation practice has made historic preservation more relevant and meaningful. So that's really important. And our, examples in Baltimore is Sharp Leadenhall and Sarah Ann Street, where you would see maybe the integrity of those districts would not have met criteria 15 years ago. In fact, when I was out looking at Sarah Ann Street in 2004 with the Maryland Historical Trust, the guy said, "There's nothing here." And today I think it is, I'm very proud of this commission to have designated that. I like this one right here. I think this is very interesting. Right now, we have 92 historic districts in Baltimore. 38 of those are local historic districts. We have 54 national.
I'm sorry, is the 92 number, is that how many National Register districts?
That's how many National Register and local historic districts that there are. Now, a local historic district, and there may be local designation and National Register designation for one neighborhood. So it should actually say there are. Yeah, yeah. So, 54 of those National Register historic districts have no protection whatsoever. And even for those districts that have both designations, sometimes the local designation is smaller than the National Register designation, so we don't have protection of the whole neighborhood. There are approximately 252 neighborhoods in Baltimore. 90% of those neighborhoods are over 50 years old. The rate of designation we have done in CHAP is about one district every 1.5 years. So if we wanted to protect Baltimore, it would take over 300 years to complete our designation at that rate. So that's another reason to do conservation districts. Equity is a really important piece of this here. This tool will make CHAP's overall program more equitable for the following reason. It allows for more affordable alterations while preserving the character of neighborhoods. So, and that should be more attractive to some of our neighborhoods of less means. It also allows for a process of public input for the major alterations, new construction and demolition. And that's really important because we know that neighborhoods really like to have a say in the development of their community. Historic properties and conservation districts would be eligible for the local credit and hopefully the state and federal credit. We're going to go quickly through this, but the Department of Planning has its own equity action plan. We looked at this, I think it was last year. We have 4 different categories here: structural integrity, procedural, distributational, like that's hard to say, and transgenerational equity. So let's look at how this looks. Structural equity. Local historic districts seems to be not the appropriate tool to preserve historic character in neighborhoods, and with many residents on limited means, conservation districts would allow preservation to help out neighborhoods and not put a financial burden on property owners. Procedural equity, the conservation districts would allow neighborhoods to participate in that design review. We talked about that. Distributational equity. Historic properties would be eligible for the tax credits. And transgenerational equity. Conservation districts would help preserve historic buildings for generations to come, and by doing so, help retain value of these properties. We know, for example, that almost every economic research or study that has been published out there states that neighborhoods that have historic designation maintain an increase in value at a rate more than neighborhoods of that are not designated. And so that's just really important. So I recommend approval. Now, I'm sure I went quickly and I've stumbled over a few words, so hopefully we can have a discussion and also answer any questions. Yes, sir.
First, I'll just say great job. First, I'll just say great job. Second off, I know you're going to be in front of the tax credit work group. Just so you all know, I'm also a member of the tax credit work group because I chair the Finance and Performance Committee. And I know one of the concerns will be the fiscal impact of this on top of what we're already dealing with. So just thinking through that as
Right.
well. That's it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yes. Yeah, and I can, well, yeah, I'll speak to you later about our preparations for that hearing.
Any other questions for Eric? Yes, Pete.
Eric, I'd like to suggest that without changing any of the substance, that there's something to be gained by some redrafting of this ordinance. And to illustrate my point, if I can, you can look at 3.7 of the statute, where it creates the basic dichotomy that we're talking about. We have the tradition of preservation districts with strict controls. We're now suggesting a lesser cousin of conservation district. The expression of the dichotomy in 3.7 really muddles the rhetoric. And I think you need to talk about two groups with reference to what we're talking about, and one has to be a preservation district, and the other has to be the conservation district. And I think that dichotomy should be expressed with those two principles in the foreground, and then to go on and talk about how, that said, we're going to talk about the value of historic preservation and the value of architectural preservation with respect to each. As it is, the dichotomy is not parallel in rhetoric, and I think is going to confuse outsiders and certainly even confuse insiders unless, as you witness my stumbling, try to say what I think is important. So I would like a cleaner dichotomy here in parallel language to keep in mind that our forefront is the preservation districts versus the conservation districts. As I say, it's hard to talk about this in general terms, but I think
So,
in its present form, the distinction is muddled by the way the rhetoric goes forward.
there's a couple things we can a couple of ways that we can address that. We can suggest that an amendment may be in the definitions section of Article 6 of the City Code. But I think probably the best place to put the differences in that dichotomy would be in our procedures and guidelines. So,
The dichotomy, as stated to my eye and ear, is just going to confuse everybody. You need to have parallel language with the basic distinction in the forefront of the rhetoric rather than mingled in with the value discussion. We're concerned both about historic and agricultural values. We're also concerned about preservation districts, the strict district versus the conservation district.
Can I ask this real quick, Eric? John, let me ask you. Because of where it is in Reader, do we have the ability to do the amendments if need be?
So, so right now, the bill is drafted, but it hasn't been heard in committee yet. So there is an opportunity that once it comes in front of committee, that we could make some changes if need be. So
Thank you, sir.
we can talk about the language.
Gotcha.
So I have a question, Commissioner. So if I am understanding what you're saying correctly, basically what you're saying is it's not really changing information, it's pulling information out from the kind of paragraph text discussion and kind of summarizing it up at the front?
I'm trying to clearly state a dichotomy. As stated here, it is not clearly stated. We're concerned both about historic values and architectural values. We're also concerned about the first-class district and the second-class district. This dichotomy muddles that,
I think
in my
another,
eye.
I think another way of looking at it too is this bill is really only targeting the changes that are in Article 6. So this bill is taking Article 6 out of context already. So it would be interesting to see the changes within the whole Article 6.
Okay, and
So like the whereas clauses that we have in there are not part of this bill.
my
'Cause they're not
concern is
changed.
not substance, it's just rhetorical and trying to keep the dichotomy clean, which I think is not clean in its present form. We can't,
Well,
we
we could
can't bring
definitely
that
take a look
language
at it.
up, can we? Can we look at 3.7?
It's on the T drive.
It's on your computers. If you look at it's the first page of the.
We
go
don't?
under the staff report, and you'll see it in the code text. Got it. Yep. And it's on page 6, between 6 and 7.
On
Yeah,
my
yeah, go to
printout,
legislature.
it's on top of 7.
Yeah.
Page 7. Unless we increase the text size, we're not gonna be able to read it anyway.
What page?
7.
On the top of page 7. You'll see the 2 bullet points up top. 1 and 2, right there.
1 and 2. And
Rachel, if you could you blow it up just for the audience for a little, because I know they're sitting in the back. Thank you. Audience, can you see?
Subject to requirements.
All right, cool. All right.
I want number 1 to say preservation district at the beginning and conservation district right following number 2, and to then go on and explicate. But that's the dichotomy being drawn. That is confused by the traditional language of number 1. But Eric, maybe we can do this.
See, I'm concerned about that because this is really
I'm going to
talking.
redraft number 1 that you don't want to redraft.
No, I'm saying if we redraft anything in here, we have to redraft everything throughout the whole ordinance.
Okay, and I can see ways to clearly prove the rhetoric of the structure, but I can't say that
Because
it's
what,
going to make it easy to get approval of the overall legislative package.
Garrett, I think John's about to say something. Go ahead, John.
So we check with legislative reference, because we work with legislative reference to draft the bills based upon what we currently have, so we can
Yeah,
talk
they
about.
certainly give me a call, and I can talk to the drafts person, say to him or her, this is what I don't like, can you fix it?
Right.
I'm not sure how
because what
difficult.
this is given, this is, right, I mean, 3.7 is giving the city council the authority to adopt, reject, or modify a proposed ordinance for a historic district or a conservation district. That's all that's saying. It just gives the city council authority to do that.
Right, but the 2 sentences are not parallel. and you need to have preservation district and conservation district up front. But let's, this discussion,
Right, because that is actually referring back to 3.8, or it's referring to 3.8 and
they're not
3.9.
parallel.
And Gary, give me 1 second, because we have one commissioner hand up. Catherine, go ahead, you had your hand up.
Okay, there, had to make sure to turn the mic on. So, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. I think I get what you're saying, which is in one, it says Historical and Architectural Preservation District, and the second one is just called Historical District if you take out. So rather than having historical and architectural, one's just historical and one's historical and architectural. And that's what you're saying about it
Number
not
one,
being
say
parallel.
Preservation district, and then to go on to
And just,
explain the values being protected. Number two, say conservation district, and then go on to talk about the values to be protected.
Yeah, so can't
I want
John,
parallel
can't
language. but
Councilman Bullock just work on
let's-
it?
Right.
Let's send it back.
Can we get this out of this
legislative
meeting?
reference who can-
If we do that too, is we're not gonna get this done by December.
I think that Councilman Bullock thinks we can.
And put your, I think your mic on, turn your mic on.
Well,
And the other thing too, again, the 3.7 is, we have a definition section in the ordinance. And I think that's where we could set up sort of that parallel and what we're trying to preserve.
Combine everything into two parts, the two parts have to be
Well,
the
Gary,
same
let's,
order.
look, I think let's do this, since you've made it clear, your position on item number 1 and number 2. Councilman Bullock has shared with us what are the possibilities of having an opportunity to look at that. You've offered the opportunity to talk to the folks. It appears we have one person on our agenda that wants to make a comment, and then we can get into further discussion about what we'll do next.
Let's go that route. I think
Okay.
nothing can be discussed here, trying to talk about how to make legislation work.
No, I appreciate it. Cool. Eric, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have one person to give public testimony, Johns Hopkins.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage. I'm not going to try to delve into text and statutory writing, and I will, because I believe I'm going to be brief and avoid the gavel of the chair. I just would like to share one thing that I learned this morning about September 11th relating to Baltimore. We have a memorial outside of our World Trade Center, and I just learned this morning part of that memorial is a piece of steel from the New York World Trade Center. Another part is it's mounted on an enormous block of granite that has notches in the side of the granite that mark the time of day when each of the major events happened. And on one day, and one day only, it's tomorrow, September 11th, the World Trade Center acts as a sundial, and the sun that casts a shadow that marks, that follows the time of day according to the notches on that block of granite stone as the first plane hit, as each of the events happened. So if you're at all inclined, I think it's, I was out there this morning and it's not quite exact because we're a day off, but it's a very powerful thing in our own connection to that horrible event. So thank you for that diversion. I'm here to talk about the conservation districts, and briefly, we as Baltimore Heritage support them, and we really do that for two reasons. One is that the conservation districts recognize two fundamental facts that are happening here in Baltimore. One is historic places don't all have the same types of buildings. Some historic districts have immaculate buildings with original windows and doors and roofs and porches, and folks there might want to keep every bit that they can. Others may be just as historic, have just as much heritage, just as important, but maybe not have all of that together. So the first thing that this bill recognizes is not every place is the same. The second thing that it recognizes is not every body is the same. Historic different districts have different people in them, and that's critical. Some people who love their historic district want to save every doorknob they can. Some people who love their historic district want to make their neighborhood better, want to see more investment, and are not as concerned about the color of the doorknob or the back windows. And this bill recognizes that both of those types of people, both of those districts are equally important and play an equally vital role in Baltimore. And for that reason, I think this is an enormous step forward for historic preservation and really for Baltimore City. As Eric said, so many of our neighborhoods are old. So many of them deserve more than just one tool in the tool belt to help them improve. And with that, I just want to recognize two folks in particular. Thank you all for your work. But Councilman Bullock, who lives and represents every day a wide variety of historic districts facing lots of different opportunities and challenges. I think he gets that as much as anybody. And then Dr. Gary Rodwell, who has been a champion of this for even before he became a CHAP commissioner. And I just wanted to recognize both of those folks for their leadership in making this possible. That's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Johns. Appreciate you. Yes, sir.
And John, I just wanted to say, I'm glad that you did not say who's been a champion for conservation districts even before they became the idea of conservation districts, because the idea of conservation districts has been around a long time. And this commission has deliberated on them for, dare I say, decades. And so I think we all pleased that it has come to this point where we now have taken it out of abstraction and research, which, you know, I was handed reams of when I joined this commission, and moved it to the point where we can have a rhetorical discussion about two sentences. So I'm really excited about where we are today.
Good, good. Johns, thanks again. We do not have anyone else who'd like to testify on the conservation district bill. So now let us all engage in conversation amongst each other before we make a recommendation. Is there anyone else who'd like to give any input on the bill? Sure. Yes.
Oh, yes.
I'll give my 2 little seconds. I've said it before. I'm
Sure.
super excited to be able to vote, because Eric Holcomb and I, we know 20 years ago, driving around Barclay and Midway and looking at Beaufront properties and, you know, really talking about, you know, demolition by neglect and talking about giving value, you know, to neighborhoods and communities and buildings where people didn't necessarily see it from the outside, but people that live in those neighborhoods, they see it. And they, you know, for a variety of reasons, may not, you know, financially be able to do certain things, or maybe, you know, just not the time is right. And one of the things I was sharing with Dr. Rodwell at the beginning is this is a labor of love of many hands. And to be able to get to this point is truly, you know, truly exciting to be there. And at each turn, you know, someone kind of took it and grew it. And to be able to get here and have a councilman that is willing to really kind of stand by that and say, I'm going to be the one to actually put it into law is an amazing thing, because sometimes, you know, we all sit here and there are a lot of great ideas that don't ever move. And so you took something and said, I'm going to be the one to make it move. So I just really want to, you know, give you your flowers right here and right now, because what that is going to grow the city in a different way as we all fight vacancy. And to really give another tool in that toolbox is an amazing thing. So everybody who has touched this, who is like going to carry it, just like kudos. So, and Eric Holcomb, kudos to you, because you know, just keep standing by.
Well said, Tamara. Anyone else? Yes.
So this is a maybe procedural question.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is, obviously, we want to vote on it today as a commission, whether or not to uphold the recommendation. Can we, can our motion just be to uphold that, and with the understanding that Commissioner will work with Councilman Bullock to kind of look at that initial language rather than kind of formalizing something in the approval. I mean,
No, that was, to be honest with you, that was my thought, that the commission, just give whatever recommendation it is. And then the other part is that the councilman and Commissioner Garrett Powers will get together and see what language they could work out.
okay.
Yep.
And then my second comment is I certainly second all of the accolades that are well deserved. I want to take this moment to say I know our next step is looking at some of the tax credit, and you guys are preparing for that meeting. And I've said before, I would love to see at some point, now that we are well and truly on the way for conservation districts, that we see if there's a way to set up a program. And I know we would have to figure out how to fund it, and it may be grants from other organizations or whatever, for smaller projects for homeowners who cannot afford those items. So whether it's they just need to replace the windows or the porch is falling down or something like that, to help make some of those home maintenance items that are ultimately important for the preservation of the structure for people who can't afford it. And I've cited before a friend that I have who is on a retired person on a fixed income, and she had to completely repoint her chimney, and it took her 2 years to save up the money to be able to do that work. And so that, to me, is a perfect example of something that is a gap that CHAP could look to try to fill with homeowners.
Catherine, thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. First, Doctor, thank you. Councilman, thank you. Eric, thank you. For the recommendation to support Council Bill 2024-0576 with the also recommendation from the commission that Councilman Bullock and Councilman Commissioner Garrett Powell get together to look at 3.7 of the bill, to look at items 1 and number 2. Do I have a motion for the commission?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I was waiting for you.
Okay. Yes, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstain? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay. Item number 2 on the docket, 2426 Pennsylvania Avenue, the Historic Arc Social Club, Baltimore City Landmark. The request, certified local government review of proposed designation of the Arc Social Club on the National Register of Historic Places. The applicant, Maryland Historical Trust. The staff is Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The owners of the Arch Social Club are seeking to have the property at 2426 Pennsylvania Avenue listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is already a contributing property in the Old West Baltimore National Register Historic District, which offers it a level of protection from federally funded or federally permitted projects and makes it eligible for historic tax credits for rehabilitation. The Arch Social Club, located at 2426 Pennsylvania Avenue, is a Baltimore City landmark designated in 2003. So now, although it is already a contributing property in the Old West Baltimore National Register Historic District, William Pleasant and other members of the club wished to see the building individually listed and began the process in 2017, partnering with Baltimore Heritage to complete the nomination as part of the Civil Rights in Baltimore Underrepresented Communities Grant. An individual listing will make it eligible for future NPS funding opportunities relating to civil rights history. The building that currently houses the Arch Social Club is historically significant for its association with Black community life and civil rights struggles in Baltimore. Originally constructed in 1912 as the Shands Theater, the property began as a vaudeville and film theater that served only white patrons. The theater remained white-only until new owners not only began to welcome Black audiences, but actively courted them beginning in 1946. Interestingly, the theater also hosted pro-communist speakers in 1949, which is especially noteworthy given that the federal government had significantly restricted the free speech of communists through legislation such as the Taft-Hartley Act and the Executive Order 9835, both of which established loyalty programs in 1947. In 1955, the property was sold again, this time to Joseph and Lillian M. Wilson, who turned it into a seafood restaurant and reinstated the segregationist policies of the Shands Theater. The following year, the property became a site of protest when CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality members, picketed in front of the restaurant. After successfully integrating lunch counters, CORE turned its attention to white tablecloth restaurants like Wilson's. 2 years later, the restaurant began to serve Black diners. The site changed ownership again in 1972 after being displaced from their property because of urban renewal plans. The Arch Social Club moved into 2426 Pennsylvania Avenue. With roots extending back to 1905, the Arch Social Club was officially established in 1914 as a Black social club and mutual aid society, open to Black men of any religion, profession, class, or political party. It is one of the oldest Black social and civic organizations in Baltimore and the second oldest secular African-American men's club in the United States. The organization continues to occupy this building today. And while we don't have written comments, we will be having testimony today pertaining to this. So staff finds that the nomination outstandingly meets National Register Criterion A, ethnic heritage, and Black local history. And staff recommends approval because it meets this criteria so well. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you. Wow, that was quick. Any questions for Rachel? If there are not, Rachel, thank you. We only have one person on the docket who'd like to speak. I'd like to invite Bill Coleman.
Yes.
By all means. And give us your full name when you get to the mic. Oh, no, when you get to the,
Okay.
It's okay.
My name is William Coleman, but better known as Bill.
Yes, sir.
Coleman. Actually, I lived the predated era of the Art Social Club. I was born in that area, 2 blocks away from what was known as the Morgan Theater, which came after the after the Shanzi. It was the successor to the Shanzi Theater. And I saw several movies there. I remember Man-Eater of Cuman with Wendell Corey and some of the Superman serial chapters. And it was a really nice theater. And when it closed, unfortunately, it became a game arcade called Sportsland. And it didn't last very long because they had a lot of like pinball machines and things like that, pin games and pick up prizes under the glass. They sold hot dogs and French fries, things like that. And it was a really nice place, but unfortunately it had a short duration. And later Wilson Restaurant took over that property and renamed it the Wilson Hall. And they had concerts upstairs in that building. Art Blake and the Jazz Messengers were there, and Horace Silver, the Jazz Tet with Art Farmer, and Frank Mignon, and several other well-known musicians and groups appeared at that theater. And it was really a great historic experience going to that Wilson Hall. And so the Art Social Club took over that location around 1972 or something like that. But I'd like to really correct some misconceptions about the history of that location because someone had called it the Wilson Theater when it was never called the Wilson Theater to my recollection, and I lived in that neighborhood. But it was the Morgan, then the Sportsland Game Arcade, and then it became Wilson Hall. And later, the Art Social Club took over, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Commissioners, before we review the recommendation, is there any conversation amongst you all that you'd like to have? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I had the privilege of doing some work for the Arch Social Club last year. We were looking at trying to enhance accessibility in the building so that they could reopen and and resume their role as a major institution, a force for good in the neighborhood and the community. And so it's very exciting to me to see them pursuing a designation and opening up potential funding streams for improving the work that they do in the building that they have.
Very cool, very cool. Anyone else?
Do we need to do anything to incorporate some of the comments, or have they already been incorporated from?
I'm sure we don't have to do anything unless, Rachel, you want to get back with Mr. Cole and just look at the history, et cetera. That's you guys can do that offline.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you do that offline. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. No, nothing you have to do now, Mr. Coleman. You're good. It was just conversational. You good. Okay, let's do it. The recommendation, staff recommends approval of the nomination because it meets National Register criterion, A, ethnic, heritage, Black history, local. Do I have a motion for the recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstain? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Who was second?
Oh, it's John. Hey, be safe, be safe. Thank you, man. Good to see you. All right. Thank you for that, you all. Last on our agenda, we have 317 West Madison Street, Mount Vernon Historical District. The request, concept review, construction, a 3-story row house. The applicant, Deshaun Coleman, Dreamers LLC, and the staff is Mr. Anthony.
Just real quick, it's only 7 minutes away from 2. Agenda, my item's at 2. I just want to maybe just confirm all parties are
Oh,
here.
okay, pal. Thank you, brother. Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's check first before we jump in. Thank you, pal. We'll see what if Eddie has anything out there, and then we'll just go through.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Okay.
No, I believe me, but I know the
Nobody?
legal stuff, so.
Okay, fine.
I just think because we had that problem that one time.
Right.
I think the agenda reflects that it's a suggested time, not a.
Understood. I can dig it. Cool. All right. Anthony, go right ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so 317 West Madison is in Mount Vernon. So from the Sanborn, we can conclude that the building was probably built in 1890 or before 1890. It was used as a shop or saloon during those times. Commercial space was on the ground floor. Here's the property located here from an aerial view from West Madison Street. The property has a long history of neglect and deterioration. By February 2007, the roof and part of the rear of the building had collapsed, leading to multiple inspections and issuance of a vacant building notice. The property was eventually sold to Dreamers LLC September 19, 2014, following a tax foreclosure. Since the acquisition, no significant repairs or maintenance have been recorded. And on July 30th, 2024, the city inspectors had an emergency demolition for the remaining parts of the building. So as it stands today, there is nothing there. The proposal is to construct a new 3-story row house. The front elevation will be modular brick, precast, built courses, lintels, and sills along with a decorative cornice. Wood windows with true divided light and Baltimore bullnose frames. New 4-paneled wood doors will be installed with a transom, and all windows and doors and trim will be painted Benjamin Moore white. The rear elevation will be a stucco finish with a metal paneled the rear will have a metal 4-panel door, vinyl clad windows, and the roof was gonna have a rubber slated roof and an HVAC condenser, which will not be seen. So with this application for review, staff applied several sections of the Mount Vernon Historical District Design Guidelines for new construction. These were A, setback, orientation, scale, proportion, rhythm, massing and composition, height, roof and cornice, steeples, chimneys, towers, and other, and other roof projects. Materials, shadows, depth and facade, windows, colors, details, orientation, street level facade, doors and main entrances, storefronts, signs, illuminations of building, and private open spaces. These were used because this is a new construction project, as we mentioned in the briefing. So starting with the setback, the project preserves its original setback and spatial relationship with the neighboring properties, ensuring that the new construction fits into the existing streetscapes. The assessment with both the setback has design guidelines to ensure that the project maintains its historical context. For the orientation, by maintaining the historic orientation and adhering to the guiding principles, the building meets these guidelines as it integrates in with other elements of the streetscape. For scale and massing, the project maintains the traditional proportions, massing, and composition, ensuring that the new construction fits within the established urban fabric. So this is the front and the rear, just together. The proportion, the project adheres to the historic proportions and features of new construction representing in the district's character. So as everything is proportionate within the context, and even though the original was only 2 stories, this one's going up 3, it still fits in with property. Rhythm, shadows, and depth of the facade. So by preserving the rhythm and enhancing the depth of the facade, the project aligns with guidelines contributing to the cohesive appearance of the district. Height, as I mentioned already, the project's height and roof aligns with the guidelines. Materials. The selection of materials and detailing ensure that the new construction will preserve the district's historic character while maintaining the visual continuity of the area. The doors will be wood, which are period appropriate and fit within overall historic preservation of the district. Windows, the use of historic accurate windows will ensure the new construction respects the building's historic period. And although the rear will have vinyl windows, that is appropriate for this area. Being careful considering for the placement of the visibility of modern equipment, the proposal meets the guidelines aesthetics. The use of historically appropriate visual color matches with the historical guidelines for new construction. This potential for compliance exists as appropriate. If lighting is added, the ensuring illuminates, enhances rather than deteriorates from the historical character. So if they do decide to come back with lighting, that will be met with staff. And for the private open space, the project respects the guidelines by maintaining traditional use of the layout of the private open space, preserving its historic character. There are no neighborhood comments. So the proposed reconstruction of the 3-story row house has been evaluated in accordance with the relevant guidelines for the Mount Vernon Historical Design Guidelines for New Construction. The project respects the historic character of the Mount Vernon Historical District by maintaining the original building's footprint, orientation, and scale, the use of traditional materials such as brick in the front facade and stucco for the rear, which are consistent with architectural styles surrounding historic row houses. So overall, the proposed reconstruction aligns with the historic preservation guidelines. Recommendation is approval of the concept of the construction of the 3-story row house with final details to be reviewed by staff. Any questions?
Any questions for Anthony? Anthony, thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioners, we have a blank sheet here for the Madison Street project, so we don't have anyone who's going to come up and give testimony. Before we make a recommendation, it's time for deliberation. Anyone have any comments? Yes, ma'am. Your mic, Ann. I got you.
Yeah, so the basement has been filled in, and so I was just curious, worried about, like, they're gonna excavate a full story of the basement and underpinning of the adjacent properties is what they would have to do unless they're maintaining the depth of the existing foundations and using it, and I just don't know that.
That's a question that we have asked and have not got the answer to. Lauren has, is aware of this aspect and if there's going to be anything dealing with
Underpinning,
huh? I'm sorry.
underpinning.
Yeah, underpin. Not only just underpinning, but I'm sorry, I'm having a rough day today. Yes, thank you. That's what she's good for. That's what she's known for, is for archaeology, and she's going to be looking into that as well. But where they had, in the online, they had the section for but they haven't gone into detail on what they're doing for that. And we do know that the front has the two they had those what do they call it, Eric? The metal panels on the front sidewalk, the entrance.
Areaways?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really am having a rough morning.
Or the Belco doors.
Yeah,
Well, one of the things.
Yeah, right here.
yeah,
So we know that there was at some point, like you said, it might have been filled in, but I'm not sure what they're planning on doing yet, and that information hasn't been.
so I'm fine with going with the staff recommendations. I just think that we want to emphasize that that we want to make sure that no adjacent properties will be compromised during excavation.
And so Catherine.
So, if I understood correctly, the organization that's applying for erecting this new building is the same owner that's owned it the entire time that prior to its collapse and through its collapse? Is that correct?
No, they weren't they bought it in 2014. I'm not the owner.
Okay,
yeah.
2014,
They
but
bought it in 2014, but it was already kind of falling apart. But they bought, like I said, they bought it when it was a little cheaper. It's the neighbors did, but
then they didn't do anything for 10 years
they did not.
until it fell down.
Yeah, they before. I mean, this proposal came in before the building was demolished. It was coming in, and then because of the state of it, it was declared that it needed to be torn down for an emergency. But they did put a proposal in at first to try to keep the front of the facade, and then build upon that. But
Did they buy it when it was refuned?
I don't. The roof was gone in 2007, so yeah, they bought it in 2014. The roof was gone in 2007, and the rear.
Okay, so maybe this is a little bit of a different case. I'm just thinking about our ongoing conversations about demolition by neglect and what, if any, measures we can take. This just seems another. Yeah, it's a little different because when they bought it, it already didn't have a roof, so.
Yeah.
So I want to make a motion that we approve staff recommendations with the note to confirm that no adjacent structures will be compromised.
Do I have a second?
Well,
Hold on one second.
Are you guys discussing?
No, we were just looking at a push. I would second.
Hold on one second, Eric. Would it?
What do you mean by confirm?
Well, I think that they have open questions about how the excavation's going to be handled, and so.
Right, which permits and plans examining will take care of.
Okay, well, I think it's sensitive in Mount Vernon District when we lost property that way.
Right.
So.
So I'm just saying, we can't confirm that they will not. We can, but what can we do? How can we confirm that they will not compromise
They've been
the adjacent property?
non-responsive, so they need to be responsive to the open staff CHAP staff questions. Is that?
They need to provide information?
Yeah.
Anthony, what did you say that they weren't clear with you on?
It would basically if they're actually, because I don't think the floor plan, I'm trying to
They
remember.
have a
They had
basement
a
shown
basement
in the diagram.
Right.
In the diagram.
I'm going to call it a diagram.
Okay.
And You know, you can see from the slides that the hole in the ground has, that if there was ever a basement, which there suggests that there is, because there's a hatch in the sidewalk, has been filled in. And so, you know, I just don't know what, anyway, that's the only concern, is that no other property is compromised in the re-excavation of this
Okay.
basement. Because I don't, you know, this is not conventional.
And so, Eric, we can put that in to be included with the final details to be reviewed and approved by staff. Am I correct?
I would say, how about if we put a note for the plans examining folks with that? Because I mean, we don't have the expertise to tell you what they're doing is going to compromise or not compromise. We're not structural engineers.
Didn't suggest we were. But I just think we can make sure that the due diligence has been done, because, you know, this is a real concern.
You're not asking staff to evaluate it, just make sure it was done.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you know, whether it's a notes to plans examination, that's fine. I don't,
So Eric, with the recommendation, how can we draft this motion as it relates to letting planning or whatever architectural department here?
How about if we say something like, approve recommendation with a note to, say that we're concerned about the adjacent properties during construction.
Okay.
Or we could talk about the
Okay.
underpinning of the properties.
Staff, and of course, Commission, we have a recommendation from the staff, approval of the concept for the construction of 3-story row house with final details to be reviewed and approved by staff with an additional review to make sure that the buildings nearby or next to the properties are not disturbed. Does anyone, yes, sir?
It doesn't have to be a no for this. I'm going to approve, vote yes for recommendation, but typically it looks like that this street is usually that the differentiation on the ground floors shows commercial or storefront. Not storefront, but like just your traditional storefront. So, and the way that they're designing it, it's looking more like a residential, like you would see like as a more residential block.
I mean,
So
that's
I would,
probably what it was originally,
what's that?
the typical residential. Usually they're built more like that and then modified for the storefront at some point.
I don't know. I
It
feel
was
like
a
that.
saloon at one point.
I feel like that whole block is more commercial than typically a residential. So I'm not like I said. That's why I don't want to add it there. I'm just saying
Yes.
for staff when they're working with final details to consider if there's any differentiation between ground floor and residential above, even because their program is all obviously mixed use anyways. So it's not a make or break for me. It's more just a recommendation to look at that.
Duly noted, and Eric's writing it down right now. Okay, with that being said, do I have anyone like to put the motion forward?
Technically, we already have a motion forward.
Well, remember, the question was, as Eric said, what was it that you asked, Eric? What was the reason? Are you still writing?
That's still right.
Okay, take your time.
Approval of staff recommendation with a note to take care not to undermine adjacent properties.
Okay.
Structurally undermine adjacent properties.
yeah. So I'll stick with that motion.
All right,
Second it.
All right.
that's fine.
No second.
Gotcha. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay.
Are we gonna?
The ayes
Ayes.
have it.
Did you ask for the ayes?
You know what? We did not ask for the ayes.
I don't know what's going on.
Do I have any ayes? Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. All right, cool. All right, any old business? Any new business? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 2:12 p.m. Have a great evening.